Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 3 of NAB from the Grass Valley booth. South Hall Lower, booth 106. You can't miss us. We're going to be talking with Ian Fletcher, the CTO of Playout. Ian, what does the CTO of Playout do?
My main role really is to act as a liaison between our customers, understanding their problems and their business needs, understanding technology and technology trends, and then kind of bringing those two things together and helping sort of set that strategy for products and in terms of how we bring them to market to solve those customer problems.
So virtualization seems to now be the catch-all term that covers many different technologies. Can you help us sort that out and understand what virtualization is?
Yes, you're right. It is a confusing area. So I think when customers talk about virtualization, they're talking about two different things. There's the technical definition of virtualization. And the best way to describe that is, if you think about your back office, the computers that you might use at work, where you might have an email server and you might have something that you run your account system on and all those kind of systems, then as computers have got faster over the years, whereas we used to use a single computer to do all of those tasks, that's not very efficient. And so virtualization enables you to basically lift those applications and spin up a virtual computer inside a bigger piece of hardware. And so you could run sort of 15 or 20 virtual computers, each running a different piece of office software, and therefore get a lot more efficiency out of using your compute hardware. But in the broadcast world, that's a bit trickier because we need very, very high performance, and in terms of playing out live TV, for example. And virtualization does have a penalty in terms of compute usage. So there are other technologies, such as containerization, that are coming around now that actually make more sense in terms of how you virtualize a TV channel. But I think the other way customers talk about virtualization is they want to virtualize their broadcast operations. So they want to take all of the physical hardware that they've got today that's very fixed and rigid and move that all into software in a way that gives them the agility to sort of dynamically change how they're using their systems, because they don't want a sort of fixed setup anymore, because they need the flexibility to be able to do different things at different times of the day with a generic set of compute hardware, rather than just have a load of servers that are sitting there burning power and not being used.
So is this a crawl, walk, run situation where some technologies are adopted early on that then pave the way for future implementation?
In some cases, yes, but in other cases, you can jump straight to the end game now. There are very successful ways that you can utilize the cloud and virtualization to deliver real serious business benefits in certain use cases, for example, Playout, provided you do it correctly and provided it's architected correctly. But there are other cases where it doesn't make sense to just shift everything to the cloud, because you end up pushing media and video up to the cloud and then bringing it back down again, which is very inefficient and also very expensive. And so in those situations, it's probably better to look at sort of newer technologies and newer approaches like fog computing, which basically means, you know, the cloud comes down to the ground and you kind of blur the line between what's in the cloud and what runs on the ground, so you get more efficiency without incurring some of the costs.
So you mentioned the cloud, and Grass Valley tends to use the term true cloud. So what is the difference between true cloud technology on one hand and false cloud technology on the other?
Basically, it's really back to what we were talking about with virtualization. A lot of vendors take the easy option of taking an existing product, virtualizing it and running it in a virtual machine in the data center. And if you do that, you can kind of say, well, it's running in the cloud, but it isn't a cloud architected solution. It's not really designed, you know, using a microservices approach that takes full advantage of what the cloud is all about. And so you're not unlocking the benefits of the cloud, you're also not taking advantages of the sort of security and scalability that you would get with the cloud, because you're just still using effectively traditional equipment. So really all you've done is you've made the cable longer between you and the equipment room, still the same system.
So you mentioned microservices. Tell us more about the concept of microservices, what it is, and what advantages it could bring to a broadcast media company.
So, the best way I like to describe them is it's the difference between cattle and pets. So, a traditional piece of software, it's really a pet. You kind of give it a name, it's quite precious to you, you run it on a computer, you look after it, you have to maintain it and feed it and make sure it doesn't die, because if it dies, you know, you're off the air. Whereas microservices are more like a field of cattle. They don't really mean anything individually to you. In fact, you can't afford to get attached to any one, because at any one time, one of them could die. So in the data center, you don't have really any control over how the virtual machines that your system's running on are being ripped up and down underneath you. So you have to be able to afford to lose a few and not have any impact to your system. So that's a very different way of designing software. It's not something you can retrofit to an existing product. You've got to design it like that in the first place. So your software has to be small components. They all have to be loosely coupled, which means you can swap them out and swap a cow for a sheep, and it shouldn't make the rest of the system fall apart. And so when you're doing software deployments, you can deploy bits of systems, you can upgrade gradually, the system stays on air all the time. And that's what, you know, the likes of Netflix and Google, and that's what they do, because if I asked you what version of Netflix do you use, it's a meaningless concept. It's just Netflix. It's just always there. And in reality, they'll be upgrading it many, many times a day. And that means they're using this kind of microservices architecture. So it enables them to be very agile, deliver value to their customers quickly, and have an extremely reliable system. Because they will actually deliberately kill some of their cows. They have something called the Chaos Monkey, which is a piece of software that deliberately shuts down parts of their system to make sure that nothing goes wrong. And that would be unthinkable to do that with a traditional broadcast equipment. I mean, can you imagine just going around the equipment room, just turning things off, see what happens? But they can do it, and as broadcast technology providers, we have to adopt the same techniques and technologies so that we can deliver those benefits to our customers.
Okay, so where is Grass Valley then in the development curve of true cloud technology for the broadcaster?
Well, this is not something you do overnight, so we've been heavily investing in this for over 5 years now. And actually at the show this week, we've launched something called ITX Flex. So ITX Flex is a playout solution where the orchestration, all the back-end systems are all completely cloud-based, and they're a true cloud architecture. So it's multi-tenancy, so lots of customers can basically share the same compute resources, and it has all those characteristics I described of microservices. So we're not beholden to any one computer anywhere to fall over and not take us off air. And so that's the real first commercial product that we're shipping based on this new technology, but we're now building lots of our other products on this same platform.
So if there's one thing you want people to remember as a takeaway from what Grass Valley is showing here at NAB, what would that be?
Importance of looking under the hood, understanding what the software technology is you're looking at. You know, it's very easy at trade shows to do slick demos, and PowerPoints are very compelling, but you've actually got to really look at the core technology. How efficient is it? What's its compute usage? Because if you're running software in the cloud, this suddenly becomes very important. It didn't used to matter when you bought a product from a vendor in a box with a label on it. You didn't know what the compute use was inside. It didn't matter. You were just buying a piece of hardware. But now if you've got to provide that hardware in AWS or in Azure, and you're paying for that, and one vendor's system needs 8 cores to do something, and another vendor's needs 32 cores to do the same job, you're looking at tens of thousands of dollars a year difference in terms of what that's going to cost you.
Great. Thanks, Ian, and thanks very much for watching. We'll be back from NAB and the Grass Valley booth.